From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang.
Hello and welcome to The Hub on CGTN. I'm Guan in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech on Wednesday at the BRICS 2024 Summit in Kazan, Russia, calling for BRICS to embrace broader perspectives and tackle global challenges head-on to advance high-quality development and cooperation. Under this year's theme, Strengthening Multilateralism for Just Global Development and Security, the summit is the first since the bloc expanded earlier this year, with its 5 new members being Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia, and Iran. As the final discussions unfold, the world is watching. How will BRICS navigate the integration of its new members? How will its growing influence impact the evolving geopolitical landscape? And is BRICS the anti-West Leviathan it is portrayed to be? Now, to delve deeper into these questions, I'm joined by Zhu Ahmed-Han, Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, and Konstantin Sheping, CGTN Russian commentator, and by the way, he's also the recipient of the China Friendship Award. Additionally, in our Beijing studio, we have John Guan, professor at the University of International Business and Economics. Zun, Sheping, and John, so good to have all of you here. This is a
good to be here.
Very important. Good to see all of you. It's a very important BRICS summit. So much is covered, which is encapsulated by the Kazan Declaration. It is a 43-page declaration coming out of this summit, talking about the rise of the global South, strengthening multilateralism, trade and financial settlements in local currencies. Professor John, let me start with you. What are the most important outcomes in your opinion?
Well, I think if you look at the BRICS in terms of differentiating from other international organizations, I think one of the defining features is that it's a organization full of substance, with concrete projects and action items, with a real financial institution, at the core of its mission, the new development bank. It has a very strong financial piece in it, in my view. So I think, this differentiates substantially from other places like G20. It's mostly a place for talking place. But here, we have concrete items. And I think, the fact that this is a place organizing major players in the global South, it's dealing with the rich countries in the world, the club of rich countries in the world, speaks volume about the rise of the global South and the need and imperative of the global South to be participating in global governance, as President Xi mentioned in his speech today.
Yeah, Professor John, you talked about financial reform, and President Xi also talked about the necessity to overhaul the international financial architecture. And the declaration talked about the fact that countries, member states, need to do more trade, more financial settlements in local currencies instead of the conventional vehicles, financial tools that they have been using over the years and decades. How has this BRICS, in particular, specifically, helped push forward that process of using local currencies to settle settlements?
Yeah, it's a major step forward, in my view. And I think we're starting to see the beginning of the end, an era of dollar hegemony, as a lot of people have been describing this. It's a new idea of an entirely new model that we haven't seen in human history, that international trade can be somehow settled with essentially a system interconnecting central banks of different countries, and using national currencies or local currencies for trade settlement, and complemented by something what's described in the media as the BRICS SDR, special drawing rights, analogous to the IMF's special drawing right, and also using modern technologies, using blockchain technologies. So it's an entirely different model we haven't seen before. And it's going to have a profound impact, in my view, on global economic and also a political landscape, because dollar is facing tremendous challenge, in my view. At least I think Donald Trump's getting that. During his campaign rhetoric, he said he's very concerned about the role of the dollar in the future. And so I think in that sense, it's a very significant development.
Konstantin, let me turn to you. BRICS was founded some 17 years ago, was largely a financial and economic grouping trying to resolve some existing financial and economic and trade issues. And now It has certainly evolved with new members included into this mechanism. What are you looking out for this year's BRICS that is taking place in your home country, Russia?
Well, obviously, the main signal, as Professor just said, is probably rethinking the global financial system. But it's if you look from the more global point of view, the most important signal that we get is BRICS will keep on growing as an alternative to the West-dominated world. I say as an alternative, but not against the West-dominated world. BRICS is an open organization. It is open for the cooperation with anyone. What I saw from the current summit as a journalist is a very huge change of narrative of the Western media towards the BRICS. It is very interesting. I do remember covering the summit back in 2016 in Chinese Xiamen. Back at that time, the Western narrative, the Western media narrative towards the BRICS as a club was the following, that BRICS is doomed to collapse because it lacks the potential. The countries are not willing to work with each other anymore. And well, basically in the nearest future, we're not gonna see BRICS as it is. We're gonna forget the very definition of BRICS. Now, 8 years later, right now, what we see in the Western media is depicting BRICS not as an organization or a club doomed to fail, but as a challenge to the West. Now the very notion what we see in the Western media that a BRICS is becoming a challenge is a very proof of the effectiveness of the BRICS. And I think that's how it's going to work. BRICS proved that it's going to grow. Now, how it's going to grow? We saw the declaration of BRICS. Now we have a new mechanism of cooperation. We get the BRICS partners, so-called partners. I want to remind that even 10, 13 years ago, we have the mechanism of outreach created. Then during the Xiamen summit, we've got the mechanism of BRICS Plus created. So the newly developed mechanism of so-called BRICS partners, it's not a full stop of BRICS development. I think there will be new models and vehicles of the BRICS growth in the future still.
But let me ask you very quickly, Konstantin, is BRICS an anti-West grouping it is portrayed to be?
It's been said many times during the BRICS summit in Kazan. BRICS is not anti-West. BRICS is not West. That's basically the notion of BRICS, of what BRICS is.
Okay, fair enough. Very simple. Zun, let me turn to you. What are the signals you're picking up from this year's summit?
Thank you, Wang, for having me. And I think I have to resonate with what both Professor John Gong and Konstantin have talked about. You know, one of the most important things that the Global South has talked about, has mobilized on since decades. I mean, let's talk about the Bandung spirit. I mean, back in the 1950s and 60s, was that why is it that global institutions favor some countries and limit the growth of others? And I think for today, you know, as we talk about the evolution of BRICS, it's obviously been years since BRICS has been first seen as doomed to failure. But today we see that Western media or generally, you know, the perception about BRICS is that it truly poses some kind of a challenge to this domination, which favors some countries over others, which is unfair treatment, as many developing countries would put it. I think that shows the evolution of BRICS in terms of how far the Global South has really come and how willing the Global South countries, despite in many cases bilateral differences, are able to come together and address challenges that they face collectively. So first of all, I mean, BRICS's expansion is a major achievement. I think anyway, we've seen in these last years, today BRICS represents a larger percentage of the global economy than the G7. This is a big achievement of individual countries, of a global way forward, of a trend that we are noticing in the last years. And now the challenge for BRICS and also the opportunity for BRICS is how this organization can really position itself to understand the growing needs, demands, aspirations, developmental needs of member countries and of partner countries, and see itself, position itself as a platform that can actually address, propose real solutions. So I think this year, the BRICS Summit is obviously, this talk about being anti-West is actually limiting the scope of BRICS, because in the end, individual countries that are not Western countries, as Constantine rightly put it, have the agency today, have the impact today, have the capacity today, have the development within their economies today to be able to mobilize and drive change and make their own individual realities better. So I think, seeing BRICS expanding, seeing that, also acknowledging, personally, I would say that we cannot assume that BRICS' success was inevitable. It has taken effort by each member country to push the organization forward and to make it as attractive as it is today to non-member countries. This is definitely positive development for Global South at large. And I think the expansion of BRICS' mandate, and as you mentioned in the declaration, there is more detail about how precisely BRICS will enable member or partner countries to achieve their development goals and to improve their trade relations, to improve their profiles is something which should be, observed how this goes forward.
Zoon, if BRICS is not about anti-West, how would you describe the newly expanded BRICS or BRICS Plus?
The problem is, this is a typical case of Orientalism, where the West would like to see the world as with reference to itself. Just because individual countries, continents, or parts of the world are developing and have found more creative, distinct ways of moving forward that are not Western does not make them anti-Western. It is their drive, it is their capacity to be able to improve the space that exists for them to operate and make their circumstances better. So I think to call BRICS anti-Western would be limiting what BRICS actually stands for. And BRICS stands for supporting development. And I think even the theme, multilateralism, which is inclusive and strengthening development and security, focusing on challenges that people and countries across the world face is something that BRICS is dedicated to. So calling it anti-Western is wrong, because these countries, these people, we sitting in the Global South, don't constantly think we want to make sure we end Western dominance. The drive is we want to make sure we are better off next year than we are this year. We have institutions that are catering to our countries and our people's needs. Yeah. And I think that is the real driving force. And let me add that Western countries are welcome to play a conducive role in this drive for basic development, safety, security, and sustainability that developing countries have.
Yeah, exactly. President Xi, during the BRICS Summit, made a very important keynote speech and made a very important 5-point proposal. He said, President Xi said, BRICS is for peace, BRICS is for innovation, BRICS is for green development, BRICS is for justice, and BRICS is for closer people-to-people exchanges. What do you make of President Xi's remarks, Professor Zhang?
Well, I take notice of his first point about BRICS is for security. And I think this is actually a very significant development for peace. Yeah. So what he's talking about is common and cooperative and comprehensive as well as sustainable security. So I think this is a fairly new concept, and I think that the fact that he's proposing BRICS to get into the security realm is very significant. I think we're facing a world that is very uncertain, that is currently with wars going on, and I think it is actually quite important to talk about peace and security at a forum like this, even though this expands well beyond its original mandate, mostly in economic and the financial arenas.
Yeah. Do you think that the Western model of international order that is largely based on the rule of the jungle worked for several decades? Let's face it. But ever since the 90s, we've seen new forms of Cold War, proxy wars, sanctions, hotspot regions expanding, not decreasing. Some say that the Western model of international relations is pushing the world into the brinks of the Third World War. So at this point, do you think the Chinese proposal of sustainable, common, comprehensive, security, community of shared future can potentially work?
Yeah, well, I mean, President Xi actually talks in detail about, the approach towards peace regarding these two ongoing wars. And I think, these are actually very concrete ideas. And he mentioned, for example, that there's actually a peace proposal jointly proposed by China and Brazil, being another BRICS member. So I think, with respect to security, China has its concrete proposals on the table. Now, with respect to justice, as you just mentioned, he's really talking about global governance. As you mentioned, today the so-called international rules-based order is actually a very wrongly described term in my view. Whose order is it? Is it really rules? There are many exemptions to these rules that applies to a certain country when that country says it's exempted from these rules. So I think all of these things have to be changed. I think what the developing countries, especially the BRICS communities, is advocating is that the global south needs to have more voice at the table in terms of shaping that international rules-based order. We need to take into consideration the opinions and voices coming from the communities of the global south. I think this is what really BRICS is all about.
Yeah. Zun, or rather Konstantin, let me turn to you. What's your reading of President Xi's five-point proposal at the BRICS, emphasizing the need for peace, innovation, green development, justice, and closer people-to-people exchanges? Which rings closer to your heart? Which resonates with you more?
Basically, everything resonates with me. I would probably would like to concentrate on the green transition. I want to underline a very important thing. The approach to the green transition from West and the global South are very different, and it signifies the very different approach to the overall global policy. And let me explain why. What is green transition nowadays? It's basically a green transition of the energy sector, right? We are facing basically going green in the energy sector. Now, the approach of the West, of the unified West, to the energetical green transition, and the approach of, say, Russia, China, a lot of other countries of the global South to the green transition of the energy sector differ a lot. How? In the West, they think mostly about developing solar, wind, and hydro. Now, Russia and China include the nuclear energy in the very notion of the green energy. That's a very big and important difference. Russia and China including the nuclear energy in the energetical green transition is very feasible because the other green energy sources are, well, so to say, very weather dependent. Let's look at the figures. Solar power plants, they produce the electricity for 1,500 hours per year. Wind, 2,500 hours per year. Hydro, 3,500 hours per year. Now, nuclear, they produce 7,500 hours per year of electricity, which is almost double as hydro, and way more than solar and wind power. They're basically producing it day in, day out, 24/7. So for China and Russia, developing nuclear power as a green transition process is very feasible. It's not feasible for West. Why? You have to understand that developing the nuclear energy, the prerequisite for that is being peaceful. Because if you are at war, your nuclear power plants will be #1 target for your enemy. So China and Russia position themselves, predict themselves in the future as peaceful countries, as stable countries, as countries who can develop the nuclear energy in the way of the green transition. Now, West understands itself as not peaceful and not stable. That's why it doesn't include the nuclear energy
Yes.
in its list of the green energy. That's very important. That has to be understood. And that's how we see the very different approach to the future world through the different approach to the green transition from the West, from Russia, China, and the global South.
Yeah, Azun, let me turn to you. How do you see the role of China and the Chinese solutions contributing to the cause of promoting justice and helping reform global governance?
Actually, that was one of the five, points that President Xi mentioned in his speech that I was going to focus on as well. I think, as I mentioned earlier in the previous, response, that one of the major contentions between the global South and the status quo powers, so to speak, has been how institutions, how the framework, in financial institutions, development institutions, etc., limit some countries to the benefit of others. And China's role in these last years, especially I would say since the Belt and Road Initiative, we see China proactively engaging individual countries bilaterally, multilaterally, through the GDI, through SCO, BRICS, etc., proposing tangible solutions to challenges that they face. And I often don't like to, we're not having a China versus US conversation, but the fact is, there was a major vacuum when it came to real solutions that developing countries were facing with respect to how Western countries that would traditionally, posture to help developing countries move forward. There was a vacuum in interest. And these conversations have not been happening in those parts of the world, but China has been actively helping countries find solutions. So I think when we talk about justice in the international institutions, when we talk about justice in financial institutions, it is firstly obviously a conversation of better representation to represent the evolution of the world with greater economic presence, with greater populations, with greater presence overall. But at the same time, it is also a conversation about setting the agenda, and countries and organizations that are able to find their own solutions and act on them are in a better position to set the agenda. So I think, for China, obviously, when we talk about justice, it is a much deeper conversation. Justice connects security, safety, agriculture, development, socioeconomic development, technology. China is doing a lot within BRICS and beyond to work on that. But at the same time, justice is a conversation about helping, enabling that part of the world which was usually on the receiving end, set the agenda. And this is where China's role contributions is playing a major, is a game changer, really, for different parts of the world that were not able to set the agenda. And I think in the end, that is what BRICS is also about.
Yeah, exactly. Enabling other countries and facilitating trade is very, very important. Professor Guan, innovation is a key point of President Xi's 5-point proposal. And also, China has been proposing new quality productive forces. Yeah. If you think about the satellites that we have above us, the electric vehicles China is producing, lithium batteries. What kind of promises do you think BRICS hold for the future of innovation?
Well, if you look at President Xi's speech, he specifically mentions the establishment of several centers or institutions to facilitate the kind of things we're talking about, innovation and technology cooperation among BRIC countries. And I think in this area, China can play a tremendous role, in my view, because within the BRIC member countries, China is actually probably the most advanced countries in terms of technologies, in terms of actually competing with the West on cutting edge technologies. And China is not doing this on its own. It's not doing this sort of exclusively by itself, but it's also, cooperating with other countries. So I think this is actually one of probably the most appealing points of BRICS to the developing countries. China indeed is willing to share some technologies with these countries in terms of transferring some technologies with these countries. So I think this is actually a quite significant thing.
I was talking to some Brazilian friends from the delegation. There's like Guan, if you visit Brazil next time, which will happen hopefully in a few weeks, you will be surprised at the number of Chinese-made electric vehicles on the Brazilian street.
Exactly. Back to Russian friend's comments about the green agenda. I think it's actually a bit of a hypocrisy on the part of the West that they were talking about the climate agenda on the one hand. On the other hand, they're imposing these tremendous tariffs on, green agenda related products from China, electric cars, solar panels, batteries. I mean, look at the kind of tariffs they're talking about. So that's a hypocrisy, absolutely hypocrisy.
Countervailing duties.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how they can explain that. I guess when they talk about green agenda, it's a green agenda by themselves, for themselves, and of themselves, and that's a total hypocrisy.
Yeah, I'm reminded of your wonderful speech. In New Jersey several years ago.
Oh yeah,
you brought the house down, Professor.
Thank you very much. You remember that.
Konstantin, we still have some 3 minutes left. Talk to us about the importance of people-to-people exchanges under the framework of BRICS, which is another emphasis by the Chinese leader. Do you think BRICS has delivered for closer contacts between ordinary folks, from around the world, especially within the BRICS?
BRICS is delivering and delivering a lot. I think the people-to-people contacts within the framework of BRICS is superbly important today because what I see as a journalist is when I talk to people from different BRICS countries, they do admit that they don't understand each other fully. Let me take my personal example. I came to China 20 years ago, and what I saw over here in People's Republic of China was totally different from the notion of what China is back in Russia. Well, now people-to-people exchange between China and Russia 20 years later, they develop at the vast pace. We saw that the current BRICS summit, there were just a series of information projects launched by Chinese media in Russia and vice versa. Now Chinese and Russian people do know each other, but if we see what's going on between BRICS countries, as a club of 10, a lot of people from different countries, they still don't know each other. There's still a long way to go. There's still a long way, a long road to the mutual understanding. It's very different cultures. You look at the BRICS, it's the countries from very different continents. Sometimes I meet people from South Africa and we just, don't understand each other even at the level of non-verbal communication because we are very different.
I'm always puzzled by the kind of official language of BRICS. South Africa being English-speaking, Anglophone, Russia, China.
Truly so.
India,
so
course,
I think the agenda of developing the people-to-people communication should be on the top during the further process of BRICS development.
Very good, very good. Zun, we have about 1 minute left. Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I think what BRICS contributes today is one thing is for people from China, Brazil, South Africa, BRICS plus countries to know each other, to understand each other, to know each other's cultures. But BRICS also contributes that basic denominator, that prerequisite, that environment to respect each other. And I think that is what, that's a big achievement of an organization like BRICS, that now we can accept, compared to 20 years ago, a world where cultural differences, different vantage points, different ways of looking at things do not make us inferior or superior to one another, but add to our overall capacity to innovate, to create, and to move forward. And I think that is what coexistence, harmonious coexistence, that aspect is important. And we have come a long way. So
guys,
to more people-to-people exchanges, but also to more respect.
Coexistence is very important. We'll have to cut you because that's all for our program. Thank you so much for tuning in to The Hub on CGTN. I'll see you next time.